When a tropical island famed for glamorous music video shoots becomes a stage for vanishing stars and eerie harmonies in the wind, Mystery Incorporated is called in. As haunting melodies echo from abandoned instruments and shadows twist under stage lights, one thing becomes clear: something sinister is orchestrating chaos. But who, or what, is pulling the strings? The helicopter blades chopped through the humid Caribbean air as the team from Mystery Incorporated gazed out over the glittering turquoise sea. A small crescent-shaped island came into view, surrounded by coral reefs and dotted with stage scaffolds, cameras, and light rigs. Yet, despite its tropical beauty, something felt wrong. Fred squinted at the structures below. "That doesn't look like a music video set," he muttered. "It looks like a haunted concert arena." As the chopper landed on a cordoned-off helipad, they were greeted by a nervous production assistant named Kai. He wore a headset, sweat beading on his brow, and gestured anxiously for them to follow. "Thank goodness you're here. The crew's been spooked. First the pyrotechnics misfired during rehearsal, then we heard singing. But no one was on stage." Velma adjusted her glasses. "Singing? Was it recorded audio?" Kai shook his head. "No. Live. Whispery. Like someone humming through a broken flute." As they walked toward the sound stage, Shaggy and Scooby trailed behind, their arms full of snacks scavenged from the catering tent. "Man, I don't care how haunted this place is," said Shaggy, biting into a giant hoagie. "As long as the food's not possessed." They reached the main performance zone, a vast arena built on the sand, framed by tropical palms and ocean mist. Massive speakers lined the stage, and musical props like drums, violins, and pianos were scattered around. Daphne surveyed the dancers practicing choreographies nearby. She had already donned a shimmering costume to blend in. "I'll get closer by joining the ensemble," she said. "If the Maestro Macabre's targeting performers, I want to be in his line of sight." Fred set up a command center near the sound booth. "We'll use hidden cameras and frequency scanners. If the instruments are reacting to anything unusual, infrasound, electromagnetic pulses, we'll catch it." Velma had a different theory. She studied a whiteboard scrawled with lyrics from the lead single the band had been recording. Her eyes narrowed. "Crimson strings across the tide, voices lost where waves collide." These lyrics aren't random. They might be coded messages. Night fell quickly on the island. The production crew retreated to their cabins as instructed. Fred and Velma remained at the tech station, Daphne joined the dancers for a moonlit rehearsal, and Shaggy and Scooby hid behind speaker towers with snacks and trembling knees. Then came the sound. Not music, but disharmony. A grand piano, untouched and locked, began to tremble. Its keys pressed down on their own, unleashing a slow, atonal melody. Cymbals clashed out of rhythm. Lights flickered above. One of the dancers screamed as a violin lifted into the air, bow moving on its own, screeching a high-pitched wail. Fred jumped up. "Everyone off the stage." But the instruments didn't stop. The drums thundered like heartbeats. The speakers howled with feedback not connected to any mic. It was as if the entire set had become alive, a haunted orchestra with no conductor. Scooby clutched Shaggy. "Ruro," Velma typed rapidly into her laptop, monitoring the wave patterns. "These aren't just random noises, they're structured. It's a musical code." As the chaos built into a deafening crescendo, the overhead spotlight swung violently, then crashed to the stage floor. A shadow moved across the back screen, tall, cloaked, and holding what looked like a conductor's baton made of bone. Everyone froze. Then, in a voice like 1,000 violins straining to stay in tune, the figure hissed through the speakers, "The encore begins." The echo of the maestro's voice hung in the salty night air like a poisonous chord. The island, once buzzing with music and tropical glamour, now pulsed with dread. Lights flickered. Instruments lay shattered across the sand. Dancers huddled near the dressing tents, some whispering prayers, others staring at the stage in stunned silence. Inside the tech tent, Fred reviewed the security footage. "There. Freeze that frame," he said, pointing at the screen. A blurred figure loomed behind the piano during the crescendo. Tall, cloaked, with glowing red eyes peeking from beneath a tattered hood. "He wasn't there before," Fred added. "And look, he's not casting a shadow." Velma adjusted her spectral analyzer. "Whoever, or whatever, this maestro is, he's emitting frequencies outside human vocal range. Look at this pattern." She pointed to jagged peaks on the screen. "Subharmonics that affect emotional states. He's not just scaring people. He's controlling them." Meanwhile, Daphne infiltrated the dancers' camp under the guise of a backup performer. She sat with Lena, one of the lead choreographers, who looked pale and jittery. "Have you seen him before?" Daphne asked softly. Lena nodded slowly. "The first night we rehearsed. I stayed late to run through my solo. I heard violin strings tuning themselves. Then I saw him, floating above the pit, as if he were made of fog and echoes. He whispered my name inside my head." Daphne frowned. "Did you tell the producers?" "They wouldn't listen. They said I was dehydrated. But since then, others have left. No one talks about it. We're under contract, and scared." Elsewhere, Shaggy and Scooby wandered near the prop tent, hoping to find refuge, and more snacks. Instead, they found a row of instruments hanging from wires like marionettes. I don't like this, Scoob," Shaggy whispered. "This place feels like a haunted band class." Suddenly, the bass drum at the end of the row thudded by itself. Then again. The cymbals clashed. Scooby yelped and jumped into Shaggy's arms. Run. They bolted, but not before the cello strings vibrated and spelled out a word in the dust on the floor: "Listen." Back at base, Velma began to crack the pattern. She mapped the musical disruptions to the lyrics and discovered something unsettling. Each verse from the lead single corresponds to a location on the island. And there's more. Hidden notes in the bridge spell out, "Maestro lives where silence sings." Fred pointed to a map. "That could be the old Echo Cave on the north side. It's the only place where sound bounces perfectly in all directions. If he's using resonance to amplify his power, that's where he's strongest." Daphne regrouped with them, sharing Lena's story. "He doesn't just haunt the stage. He watches. Waits. And he knows our names." Fred nodded grimly. "Then it's time to confront him. Tonight." As they approached the cave through the jungle path, the wind picked up. Tree leaves trembled like strings on a harp. The silence deepened. Even the crickets stopped. Inside the cave, the air was unnaturally still. The slightest footstep echoed in surround sound. Strange carvings lined the rock walls, ancient symbols mixed with modern sheet music, as if a composer from another world had written his symphony in stone. Velma whispered, "This isn't just a cave. It's an amplifier." Suddenly, a lone violin floated down from the ceiling, bow-drawing itself across the strings. A melody played, a soft, haunting lullaby in a minor key. The same one from the opening night rehearsal. Daphne's eyes widened. "He's here." Fog spilled into the cave's entrance. The maestro stepped out, not walking, but gliding. His cloak moved like ink in water. His baton raised. And behind him, rising from the shadows, were instruments moving like soldiers in formation. He pointed the baton at Fred. "You invaded my concert hall," the voice rasped, not through speech but directly into their minds. "You interrupt my masterpiece. Now, you join the finale." Before anyone could react, the cave walls vibrated violently. Scooby howled. The maestro lifted his baton higher, and the instruments surged toward them like a crashing wave. The cave erupted in a crescendo of chaos. Violins screamed like banshees, cymbals clashed midair, and drums pounded without touch. Fred ducked as a flying flute whizzed past his ear. "We need cover, now," he shouted, grabbing Daphne's arm and pulling her behind a stone pillar. Scooby and Shaggy dove into a crevice, trembling beneath their shaking knees. Velma clutched her analyzer close as static poured across the screen. "These instruments aren't playing randomly. They're in sync. He's conducting a weaponized symphony." The maestro floated above the chaos, arms wide, cloak fluttering as if caught in an eternal breeze. His baton glowed with a pulsating red light, synchronizing each movement with a new attack. "Your resistance is out of tune," he intoned. "Dissonance must be erased." Fred reached into his backpack and retrieved a set of sonic dampeners, experimental tech developed by Mystery Incorporated for another case. "Velma, if I plant these near the cave's natural echo points, we might short out his control." "You'll need at least 3 in place to disrupt the acoustic field," she replied. "But the cave is crawling with cursed instruments." "Leave that to me," Daphne said, tying back her hair. "I'll draw them away. They respond to movement. Loud movement." "Ruro," Scooby whimpered. Daphne leapt from behind the pillar and ran toward the center of the cave. "Hey Maestro! Your rhythm's offbeat," she yelled, clapping and stomping as she ran. The instruments swarmed after her like bees to a beacon, and the maestro's focus shifted. Fred dashed to the first node and planted a dampener. Shaggy, surprisingly nimble when terrified, joined in. "We'll handle the second, man, but if I get hit by a flying triangle, I'm out." Scooby reluctantly followed, clamping the device to a jutting stalagmite with shaking paws. "Already." Velma stayed near the entrance, decoding more of the cave's carvings. She noticed something odd, ancient lyrics inscribed between the musical notes. A chant. A hymn. "This isn't just a conductor's chamber, it's a summoning circle," she whispered. "The maestro wasn't born here. He was invited." As Fred planted the final dampener, a loud pulse rippled through the cave like a shockwave. The instruments froze in midair. The maestro shrieked, a dissonant wail that bent the air. "You dare silence my opus." The baton in his hand cracked, and the instruments fell to the ground in a metallic crash. For a moment, all was still. But then, a new sound. A deep, slow rumble from beneath their feet. Velma stepped forward, reading more of the inscriptions aloud. "Those who interrupt the composition awaken the composer below." A massive grand piano near the back of the cave split open, revealing a gaping void beneath its broken keys. From it, dark mist poured upward, and a second form began to rise, larger, formless, with spectral arms of smoke and cords of vibrating strings for veins. "The composer below," Fred breathed. "It was never just one entity. The maestro is only the conductor. The real horror is the music itself." The maestro cowered now, his voice no longer proud but desperate. "Do not wake him. My music holds him back, barely." But it was too late. The composer's voice surged from the abyss, low and guttural like 1,000 cellos crying at once. "Silence has failed. The song shall be rewritten," in screams. The cave shook again. The air turned heavy. The team scrambled back toward the entrance, instruments now crumbling to dust behind them. But the composer was rising faster. Velma turned one last time and shouted, "There's only one chance, we have to rewrite the song. Reversing the score could seal him again." Fred nodded. "Then we need the sheet music, and a new performance." And as the team escaped into the night, Daphne looked back at the maestro, who now knelt before the composer's pit, weeping into his shattered baton. "I only wanted to conduct a masterpiece," he whispered. "But some songs were never meant to be played." The moon cast long shadows over the jungle as the team regrouped in the old composer's cabin, hidden deep within the island's tangled heart. The air inside was thick with dust and forgotten memories, walls lined with aged sheet music stained by time. Velma spread the fragile papers across a battered wooden table. "This is the original score," she said reverently. "The one that binds the maestro and the composer below." Fred leaned in, tracing the notes with his finger. "If we can play this backwards, reverse the melody, we might undo the curse and send the composer back to his silence." Daphne rubbed her temples. "But who's brave enough to lead this final performance? The maestro's baton is broken, and we don't even know if the music will obey us." Scooby nervously nudged Shaggy, who mumbled, "I'm not the maestro type, man." Velma was already preparing a makeshift conductor's baton from a broken piece of wood. "It's not about who leads, but who believes in the music's power. The song is alive, but it listens to intention." Fred gathered a handful of instruments, a battered violin, a cracked trumpet, and a drum missing half its skin. "We'll play the reverse score live, just like a concert. And we'll need to coordinate perfectly. One wrong note could make things worse." Outside, the night was alive with eerie echoes. Somewhere in the distance, the faint strains of the maestro's cursed melody haunted the air. Daphne felt a chill run down her spine. "We don't have much time. The composer is rising fast." As they set up an improvised stage inside the cabin, the jungle seemed to close in, leaves rustling like whispered warnings. Velma tuned the violin, its strings quivering in the stillness. "Every note matters," she said softly. Shaggy gulped, clutching drumsticks like lifelines. "I hope this is over soon." "My heart's doing the cha-cha-cha," Scooby barked encouragement, wagging his tail, trying to shake off the fear. Fred raised his cracked trumpet. "On my count. Ready?" The team nodded, tension thick enough to cut with a knife. Velma took a deep breath and began the reversed melody. The notes sounded strange, familiar yet unsettling, like a memory played backward. Daphne joined in with the violin, each stroke careful and deliberate. Fred's trumpet echoed, wavering but growing stronger. Shaggy hesitated, then struck the drum, the beat steady despite his trembling hands. Outside, the cave trembled violently. The composer's shadow darkened the forest edges, stretching like a giant black stain. Suddenly, the music faltered. Daphne's bow slipped, screeching against the strings. The instruments around them rattled ominously. A cold wind swept through the cabin, extinguishing their lantern. "Keep playing," Velma urged, her voice fierce in the darkness. "We're breaking the curse." Light returned slowly as the reversed song built in intensity. The air vibrated, lifting dust motes like tiny dancers. The shadow looming over the cave twisted, convulsing as if caught in a web of sound. The maestro's voice whispered through the trees, fragmented and defeated. "No. Not like this." The instruments bound to the composer fell silent, collapsing into silence like a wave retreating. The cave stopped shaking. The oppressive weight lifted. As the last note faded, the team stared at each other, breaths heavy, hearts pounding. The island was still, eerily calm. Daphne stepped outside and looked toward the cave entrance. The dark void was sealed, covered now with rubble and silence. Fred smiled tiredly. "We did it." But then Velma's face darkened. She pointed to a final, strange mark etched on the score's last page, a symbol they hadn't noticed before. "The song isn't finished," she whispered. "There's a hidden verse. And it warns of an encore." The cabin's fragile walls trembled under the weight of an unseen presence. Velma traced the mysterious symbol on the back of the score, her fingers trembling. This isn't just a warning. It's a summons." Daphne exchanged a worried glance with Fred. "You mean, the composer might come back?" "Not just come back," Velma replied gravely. "The encore will call forth his true form. Something far worse than what we've faced." Outside, the island's night was thick with unnatural silence. The usual symphony of insects and waves was muted, as if the entire world held its breath. Scooby whimpered softly, sensing the growing dread. "We have to prepare," Fred said, pacing. "If the encore's coming, we need to find a way to stop it before it begins." Daphne knelt beside the pile of broken instruments, her fingers brushing over the splintered wood and twisted strings. "The maestro's baton broke, but what if it can be reforged? Maybe the music's power isn't destroyed, just dormant." Velma's eyes gleamed with sudden insight. "Yes. If we can reconstruct the baton using the original materials, infused with our own intention to protect rather than destroy, it might be the key to control the encore." "But we don't have the original wood," Fred said skeptically. "Only these fragments." "Then we'll have to combine them," Velma said firmly. "With precision and care." As the team gathered around the makeshift workbench, Shaggy groaned, clutching a half-melted candle. This is starting to sound like a nightmare concert from hell." Scooby barked in agreement, his eyes wide. The hours passed in tense silence, broken only by the occasional clink of tools and whispered calculations. Velma carefully fitted the broken baton pieces together, while Daphne gathered raw materials from the surrounding forest, twisted branches, old vines, and shimmering sap rumored to have mystical properties. Fred and Velma worked in tandem, weaving the elements into a fragile but promising new baton. The air crackled with energy as the final piece clicked into place, emitting a soft, pulsating glow. "It's ready," Velma breathed. Suddenly, a deep, resonant hum filled the cabin. The walls vibrated as shadows danced in flickering candlelight. The encore had begun. Outside, the jungle roared to life with spectral instruments materializing from the mist. Ghostly violins, phantom drums, and shimmering harps. The composer's silhouette loomed larger, eyes glowing like molten embers. The team braced themselves. Fred raised the reforged baton, its light cutting through the darkness. "This is our final movement," he declared. Velma nodded, pulling the reversed score from the table. "We play not to fight, but to harmonize. To rewrite the darkness with light." As the first notes rang out, the spectral instruments hesitated, caught in the delicate balance of sound and silence. The composer's growl turned into a wail, then a whisper. The island seemed to pulse with the music's power, every leaf and stone vibrating in rhythm. But as the song reached its crescendo, a terrible truth unfolded: the encore was not just a repeat, but a transformation. The composer's form morphed, merging with the instruments themselves, becoming an unstoppable symphony of shadow and sound. Daphne's voice cracked with determination: "We have to finish this, no matter the cost." Fred's baton blazed with energy. The final note was theirs to claim. The air was thick with electricity, the reforged baton glowing fiercely in Fred's hand as the spectral symphony swirled around them. The composer, now a monstrous fusion of shadow and instrument, towered over the cabin, his every movement sending waves of discordant sound crashing through the island. Daphne's heart pounded. This is it. The last chance to end this nightmare. Velma's voice was steady but urgent. We have to synchronize perfectly. Every note must be pure, every beat intentional. Our music is our weapon, and our salvation. Shaggy, gripping his drumsticks with white-knuckled determination, whispered, I never thought I'd say this, but, let's rock. Scooby barked in agreement, his tail wagging despite the fear. Fred lifted the baton high, and the team launched into the reverse score once more, but this time, their music was different. Their hearts and souls poured into every note, weaving a tapestry of hope amid the chaos. The composer screamed, his voice a shattered melody as the magic of their song began to unravel his dark form. Instruments rattled, the phantom symphony breaking apart like glass. But the battle was far from over. The island shook violently, trees splintering, and waves crashing against the cliffs. The shadows clawed to hold on, twisting into grotesque shapes, desperate to survive. Daphne's violin sang out a piercing solo, cutting through the turmoil. Velma's steady hands guided the rhythm, Fred's trumpet soared with a clarion call, and Shaggy's drumbeats grounded their resolve. Step by step, note by note, the darkness receded. As the final chord struck, the composer's form shattered into shards of shimmering light that scattered into the night breeze. The island fell silent, bathed in a calm glow that felt like dawn breaking after a long, harrowing night. Velma exhaled deeply. It's over. Fred lowered the baton, exhaustion and relief flooding his features. The curse is broken. The maestro is gone. Daphne stepped outside, the first rays of morning sun kissing the lush greenery. We saved the island. But more than that, we found the true power of music. Scooby barked joyfully, running in circles, and Shaggy grinned, relief washing over him. But as they turned to leave, Velma paused, her eyes catching the faintest shimmer beneath a fallen leaf. A tiny music note etched into the ground, glowing softly. She whispered, "Music never truly dies. It waits for the next player." The island breathed a peaceful sigh, but the echoes of the Maestro Macabro's melody would linger, in their hearts, in the wind, and forever in the shadows of Music Island. The island's silence marked the end of a dark symphony, yet the melody of courage and friendship lingers in the air. They faced shadows, conquered fears, and proved that even in the darkest notes, hope can create harmony. Though the maestro is gone, the music, and its mysteries, remain, reminding us that every ending is just the beginning of a new song.